Welcome to our Movie Recaps channel. We hope you thoroughly enjoy our videos. Before diving in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. In the harsh environment of -40 degrees Celsius, a group of apes were enslaved by humans, forced into hard labor. Since being captured, they hadn't eaten anything. An elderly ape stumbled while working and was about to be whipped by the humans. Caesar, the leader, couldn't bear to see his kin suffer and stepped forward.
Leave him!
Upon hearing Caesar's cry, all the apes went on strike, raising their arms in support of him. Seeing this, the colonel ordered his men to bring Caesar before him to endure the lashings. Caesar, for the safety of his tribe, had no choice but to kneel and endure the pain. However, the ruthless colonel wasn't inclined to let them off.
Tell them to get back to work.
Apes need food, water.
He stood up, sending the errant ape back to his home with a gunshot, then pointed the gun at Caesar's head and began to count down.
5, 4.
Faced with the colonel's threat, one brave ape immediately picked up a stone, knowing that only Caesar's survival offered hope for escape. Other apes followed suit. Though furious, Caesar couldn't make a move and could only watch helplessly as his nemesis slipped away. Later, Caesar was crucified on a wooden frame. Maurice and Rocket observed everything and brainstormed a rescue plan. As night fell, Donkey approached Caesar, brandishing a weapon, only to cut the ropes holding Caesar when he got closer. It turned out the colonel was giving Caesar a warning.
Again, and I'll begin slaughtering the apes one by one.
Apes need food and water.
They'll get food and water when they finish their work.
But Caesar had already identified the colonel's defensive fortifications. He knew that the original tribe would be slaughtered if they lost their utility. Seeing the colonel's ruthlessness, Caesar was enraged. He seemed to go mad, lunging at the colonel, but was firmly restrained. By the way, if you enjoy our movie recaps, we're currently hosting a giveaway for our audience. We're excited to announce that a brand new scooter awaits one lucky subscriber. Don't miss out. Subscribe and follow us to stay tuned for more updates. The next day, the colonel brought a cart of food and threw it to the apes in cages. The cost, however, was that Caesar had to endure being doused with cold water in freezing temperatures. This act moved the tribe deeply. Meanwhile, Rocket and Maurice were exploring the terrain and discovered an underground tunnel that led to the military base above ground. At that moment, Caesar was already in a state of near unconsciousness from the cold. In his delirium, he seemed to glimpse Cobra.
Slave. You cannot save them. Apes all die here. Join me.
Realizing it was Donkey, Caesar was released as Donkey cut the rope. The colonel told Donkey that if Caesar survived, they would both be punished. Meanwhile, on the other side, a little girl disregarded the danger and approached the base. She safely passed through the blockade and reached the cage where Caesar was held. She took out the doll that had been with her for a long time and threw it to Caesar. Seeing Caesar's reaction, she immediately asked if he was thirsty and brought water for him. It was the little girl's help that helped Caesar get through the night. At this moment, the apes behind them made a gesture of unity, and the little girl reached out to encourage Caesar. However, at that moment, patrolling soldiers arrived. Caesar told the little girl to run, and Rocket, who was observing from outside, boldly approached the soldiers, diverting their attention and saving the little girl. Thus, Rocket was also thrown into a cage. The first thing loyal Rocket did upon entering was to check on Caesar. The next day, the apes were released to work. During work, they calculated the distance of the tunnel and reported it to Caesar, who then conveyed the information to Maurice outside through gestures. Upon receiving the news, Maurice immediately took Bad Ape to dig in the tunnel. In the evening, the apes were brought back to their cages, while on the other side, Bad Ape found the location of the adult apes and began to dig. Due to height restrictions, he had to step on Maurice's back. With help, he quickly dug through the tunnel and saw Rocket and many other apes inside. The apes were extremely grateful for his help. However, at the same time, water began to flow into the tunnel leading to the young apes. Helpless, Maurice had to close the tunnel and think of another plan. Upon learning of the situation, the apes above immediately reported to Caesar. Caesar glanced at the children and indicated that they could only be rescued from the ground, but the base was guarded by soldiers. Caesar fell into thought. Shortly after, patrolling soldiers emerged again. As he observed the situation below, his head suddenly received a blast of Oreos. Enraged, he immediately turned around.
You animals!
The soldier, whose mind was clouded by anger, immediately approached the cage filled with apes. Unbeknownst to him, this was Rocket's scheme. Rocket confronted the soldier, holding a bunch of Oreos, all done to divert the man's attention. Suddenly, the soldier was dragged into a hole. It turned out Maurice had been waiting. Rocket obtained the keys and firearms, and they quickly rescued Caesar. Then they went to where the children were being held. When Caesar saw the children, tears welled up in his eyes. Father and son embraced tightly, but the urgent task now was to lead the kids to safety. They divided the tasks. One stood guard while the other evacuated the children. The apes climbed up the iron ropes to the cages of the older apes. Then they were led into the underground tunnel to meet up with Maurice. Soon, all the apes escaped, leaving only a few adults behind. Seeing all their kin leaving, Caesar approached the edge. Rocket hurriedly approached and asked Caesar what was wrong, but Caesar stared at the colonel's window with hatred. He turned to Rocket and said,
I am like Cobra. He could not escape his hate. I still cannot escape mine.
But at this moment, the Northern Forces warplanes arrived to apprehend the brutal colonel. The loud roar prompted the soldiers to take urgent action, setting up anti-aircraft guns to counterattack. However, the escaping apes fell victim to the chaos, trapped in the middle of the battlefield. Meanwhile, Caesar arrived at the colonel's quarters and noticed soldiers shouting for him. Yet, there was no response from the colonel. Seizing the opportunity amidst the turmoil, Caesar stealthily climbed onto the colonel's balcony. What he saw was utter devastation. On the table, he found a blood-stained decanter and a photograph. Quietly entering the colonel's room, he discovered the colonel lying weakly. Caesar aimed his gun at the colonel's head. However, when he saw the doll on the ground, he realized the colonel was also afflicted with the simian flu. Witnessing the colonel's agony, Caesar couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. Perhaps it was the sight of the photo or the restraint of his hatred by reason. He gradually lowered the gun, placed it on the table, and turned to leave. But the colonel couldn't bear to have his dignity trampled upon. He picked up the gun and ended his own life. As for the apes, how they would escape the battlefield remained uncertain. The once enslaved apes were assisting the soldiers in fighting the planes. On the side, soldiers aimed rocket launchers into the sky. One precise shot hit the tail of a plane, successfully bringing it down. After some celebration, Rocket once again helped the soldiers replenish ammunition, preparing for the next assault. However, at this moment, they noticed the massive exodus of the ape tribe. They quickly loaded their weapons and turned them towards the retreating ape forces, firing frantically. Just as Caesar emerged from the colonel's room, he witnessed the apes being ruthlessly slaughtered. In his fury, he noticed a nearby gasoline canister that had been knocked over. Thinking of the grenades still inside the room, Caesar immediately returned, grabbed them, and swiftly made his way to the balcony. He leaped down, using the flag as a cushion to soften the fall, and dashed towards the gasoline canister amidst the hail of bullets. Meanwhile, on the other side, the overwhelming firepower made the trek unbearable, and Donkey, seeing so many of his kind fall before him, experienced a profound internal conflict.
Donkey! Grenade launcher!
Just as Donkey took out the grenade launcher, he froze. He saw Caesar, risking his life to save the apes, darting through the hail of bullets. Then, to Donkey's astonishment, Caesar emerged with a hand grenade. However, at a critical moment, he was struck down by an arrow, and the grenade was knocked away. A soldier with a crossbow quickly advanced, taking aim at Caesar. Seeing all this unfold, Donkey's expression changed. In the next instant, the soldier was blown apart by a shell. As the smoke cleared, Caesar looked back in confusion. It was Donkey who had saved him in the moment of the apes' survival crisis. However, he was also facing soldiers raising their guns behind him. One shot ended Donkey's life. Realizing what had happened, Caesar immediately grabbed a grenade and hurled it towards the gasoline canister. In an instant, a massive explosion destroyed the soldiers' entire defense line. As Caesar stood up and looked at the line of defense turning to ashes, he suddenly heard a sound and looked to the side. Another, even bigger explosion struck. Fortunately, Caesar quickly dove into the tunnel just in time. Thus, the entire base turned into ashes. Outside, the apes saw the defense line collapse and immediately began to leave. Meanwhile, Caesar crawled out of the tunnel, seeing soldiers rushing in from the north. Caesar disregarded the danger. Looking into the distance, the soldiers raised their guns at him, but they witnessed an avalanche in the distance. Maurice noticed the danger and quickly organized the young apes to climb up the trees. Caesar also swiftly ran after the avalanche, leaping up and climbing onto a tree. The unfortunate soldiers could only be engulfed. No long after, Caesar miraculously survived, and his apes managed to evade the danger by staying in the trees. They then embarked on a long-distance migration and arrived at a secluded paradise. Seeing the apes safely out of danger, Caesar finally relaxed and sat down, with Maurice still by his side as always. He showed Maurice his wounds and then took his hand to confide in him about some matters.
Don't worry. Maurice. Now, apes are strong. With or without me.
After speaking, Caesar looked at the joyful apes nearby and fell into a deep sleep. As for what will happen next, let us anticipate the release of the 4th installment.